Please, God, deliver us from this evil. Save her life. Let your thunder roar and scatter these devils.
Hashtag a mother's prayer in the desert. The sun hung merciless and ancient above the Sahara, a burning eye that watched without pity. Fatima Al-Rashid pressed her cracked lips together and adjusted the weight of her daughter against her hip. Little Amira had stopped crying hours ago, and the silence frightened Fatima more than any scream ever could. "Stay with me, my heart," she whispered, her voice a rasp of sand and desperation. "Stay with me." They had been walking for 3 days now. 3 days since the truck had broken down. 3 days since the smuggler had taken their money and vanished into the shimmer of heat waves, promising to return with help. 3 days of watching the horizon swallow hope like the desert swallowed water. Fatima remembered her grandmother's words, spoken in the cool shadows of their home in Aleppo before the bombs came, before the world she knew crumbled into dust and memory. The desert is not cruel, child. It is honest. It takes everything false and leaves only what is true. What was true now was this: her daughter's shallow breathing, the last mouthful of water in the plastic bottle tucked against her chest, and the prayer that moved through her like blood, like breath, like the very pulse of survival itself. 6 months ago, they had fled Syria under a moonless sky. Fatima had carried nothing but Amira, then only 4 years old, a small bag of photographs, and her mother's Quran, its pages soft from generations of faithful hands. Her husband, Khalil, had kissed them both at the border, his eyes bright with tears. He refused to shed. "I will find you," he had promised. "In Germany, I will find you." The smugglers had separated them. Men in one group, women and children in another. Safer, they claimed. Faster. Fatima had learned quickly that smugglers' promises were written in sand. The journey had taken them through Turkey, where they slept in abandoned buildings and ate what strangers offered. Then Greece, where Amira had learned to sleep through the sound of waves crashing against overcrowded boats. Through the Balkans, where kindness and cruelty wore the same human faces. And finally, to Libya, where they waited in a warehouse with 200 others, all of them dreaming of European shores. But Europe was not meant to be. Not yet. The route had changed, the smugglers announced. Too many patrols on the Mediterranean. They would go through Algeria, through Morocco, across the strait to Spain. Longer, but safer. Safer, Fatima had repeated, tasting the word like a foreign thing. Now, lost in the vast emptiness of the Sahara, she understood that safety was another lie. The only truth was the sand beneath her feet and the child in her arms. When the truck had shuddered and died, coughing black smoke into the copper sky, there had been 15 of them. Families from Somalia, Eritrea, Syria, children who had forgotten what playgrounds looked like. Mothers who had learned to count their blessings in heartbeats. The smuggler, a thin man with a scar that split his left eyebrow, had told them to wait. He would walk to the nearest village, bring back another vehicle. 2 days, he said, maybe 3. Stay with the truck. Do not wander. But 2 days became 3, and 3 became forever. On the second night, a sandstorm had descended upon them with biblical fury. When it passed, when Fatima had finally uncurled her body from around Amira's, she found that half their group had scattered into the darkness, seeking shelter that did not exist. She never saw them again. By the 3rd morning, those who remained made a terrible decision. They would split up, walk in different directions, increase the chances that someone would find help. An elderly Somali woman had pressed a compass into Fatima's hands. "North," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "Always north. There is a road. Inshallah, you will find it." Fatima had walked north, always north, the compass needle trembling like her own heart. Now, on the fourth day, with the sun climbing toward its noon throne, Fatima fell to her knees. She did not fall from weakness, though weakness lived in every fiber of her being. She fell from purpose. She fell because there was nothing left to do but pray. Gently she laid Amira on the sand, using her own body to cast a thin ribbon of shade across the child's face. Amira's eyes fluttered, but did not open. Her skin, once the color of warm honey, had grown pale, almost gray. Fatima faced what she believed was east, toward Mecca, toward home, toward everything she had lost, and began to pray. "Bismillah Irrahman, Irrahman," she breathed. "In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful." The words rose from somewhere deeper than memory. They came from her mother's voice, from her grandmother's hands, from centuries of women who had knelt in dark hours and demanded that heaven listen. "Ya Allah," she continued, her voice cracking, "I do not ask for myself. I am nothing. I am sand. I am wind. But this child," her voice broke, "this child is everything." She pressed her forehead to the burning ground, feeling the heat sear her skin. She welcomed the pain. Pain meant she was still alive. Pain meant she could still fight. "I have walked through fire. I have walked through war. I have buried my mother in a land that was no longer ours. I have said goodbye to my husband without knowing if I would ever see his face again." Tears carved rivers through the dust on her cheeks. "I have done everything you asked, everything." She lifted her head, staring at the empty sky. "Now I am asking you, just this once, not for me, for her. Let her live. Let her grow. Let her know a world without bombs and borders and endless running. Let her know what it means to be safe." The wind stirred, carrying grains of sand that stung her eyes. Fatima wiped them clear and continued, "If you need a life, take mine. I offer it freely, gladly. But let her live, please." The final word emerged as something barely human, a sound torn from the deepest chambers of a mother's heart. "Please." She remained there, forehead to earth, as the sun continued its indifferent journey across the sky. She did not know how long she had been praying when she heard the sound. At first, she thought it was a hallucination, the desert playing tricks on her dying mind. But no, there it was again. An engine, distant but real. Fatima raised her head. On the horizon, shimmering like a mirage, was a vehicle. She tried to stand, but her legs refused, so she crawled. She gathered Amira in her arms and crawled toward the sound, leaving a trail in the sand like a wounded animal. "Here!" She tried to scream, but only a whisper emerged. "We are here." The vehicle grew closer, a truck, old and rusted, but moving, alive. Fatima waved her arm. She waved until her shoulder burned with the effort. She waved until the truck changed direction, turned toward them, became undeniably real. It stopped 10 meters away. A door opened. The woman who emerged was perhaps 60, with skin weathered to leather by decades of sun. She wore a blue Tuareg robe, and her eyes, when they met Fatima's, held no surprise. Only recognition, the recognition of one survivor meeting another. "How long?" the woman asked in French-accented Arabic. 4 days. Maybe more. I lost count. The woman nodded and moved quickly. She checked Amira's pulse, her breathing, the dryness of her lips. Then she pulled a water bottle from the truck and began administering drops, just drops to the child's mouth. Slowly, she said, "Too much will kill her." "Will she live?" Fatima asked, the words scraping her throat. The woman looked at her for a long moment. "You prayed." It was not a question. "Yes, then she will live." The woman smiled, revealing a gap where her front teeth should have been. God does not ignore a mother's prayer. This I know. The woman's name was Miriam, and she had been driving this route for 15 years. "I find them," she explained as the truck bounced over the dunes, Amira sleeping now in the back, an IV drip produced from a medical kit, restoring life to her small body. The ones the smugglers abandon, the ones the desert tries to claim. "Why?" Fatima asked. Miriam was silent for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was distant, traveling through years of memory. "I had a daughter once, Yasmin, beautiful like yours. We were crossing this same desert, fleeing a different war. A war you probably never heard of. Small countries, small wars. The world does not notice." She paused. "The smuggler left us, like yours left you. I walked for 6 days. And your daughter, she died on the 5th day, in my arms. I was too weak to even bury her. I left her in the sand." Miriam's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "A shepherd found me the next morning. I do not know why I lived. For years I wished I had not. I'm sorry," Fatima whispered. "Don't be. Yasmin's death gave me purpose. I bought this truck. I learned this desert. Every soul I save for her. Every mother I find for myself. For the mother I was, carrying my child through the sand, praying the same prayer you prayed today." Fatima reached across the seat and took Miriam's hand. They drove in silence, two women connected by a grief so vast it had become a kind of love. They reached the refugee camp at dusk. It sprawled across the desert like a temporary city, white tents and blue tarps, crowds of people waiting for a future that might never arrive. But to Fatima, it looked like paradise. It looked like hope made visible. Medics took Amira immediately, carrying her into a clinic where real doctors with real medicine would fight for her life. Fatima tried to follow, but Miriam held her back. "Let them work. She will live. I have seen many children, and I know the ones who survive. Your daughter has your strength." Fatima collapsed into Miriam's arms and wept. She wept for Amira, for Khalil, for her mother buried in Syria, for all the miles behind them, and all the miles yet to come. She wept until there was nothing left, until the tears ran dry like a desert well. And then, somehow, she laughed. It started as a tremor, a crack in the dam of her grief, but it grew. It grew until she was laughing and crying simultaneously, until Miriam was laughing too, until they were two women standing in the dust of a refugee camp, finding joy in the simple miracle of survival. "Thank you," Fatima said when she could finally speak. "Thank you for saving us." Miriam shook her head. "I did not save you. Your prayer saved you. I was only the answer." 1 year later, the apartment in Munich was small but warm. Fatima stood at the window, watching snow fall over the city. Behind her, Amira sat at the kitchen table, drawing pictures with the crayons her teacher had given her. She was drawing their family, stick figures with enormous smiles. The doorbell rang. Fatima opened it, and there stood Khalil. He was thinner than she remembered. His beard was longer, shot through with gray that had not been there before. But his eyes were the same. The eyes that had promised to find her. "I told you," he said, his voice breaking. "I told you I would come." Fatima pulled him inside. Wrap her arms around him, buried her face in his chest. She breathed in the scent of him. Different now, marked by different journeys, different deserts. But still him, still her husband, still home. "Baba," Amira screamed, launching herself from the table. Khalil caught her, lifted her, held his family in his arms for the first time in over a year. Later that night, after Amira had fallen asleep between them, Khalil asked about the journey. He asked about the desert. Fatima told him everything. The truck breaking down, the sandstorm, the endless walking, Amira's silence, and finally, the prayer. "Do you think God heard you?" Khalil asked. Fatima thought of Miriam, driving her battered truck through the Sahara, searching for mothers and children. She thought of Yasmin, buried in the sand 20 years ago, her death giving birth to 100 rescues. She thought of the mysterious mathematics of suffering and grace. "I think," she said slowly, "that God hears every prayer, but I also think He answers them through people, through Miriam, through the doctors at the camp, through you for never stopping, for finding us." Khalil kissed her forehead. "Then we owe many people many thanks." "Yes," Fatima agreed, "but first we owe them our lives. And we will spend those lives proving we were worth saving." Outside the window, the snow continued to fall, covering Munich in white. In Syria, the war continued. In Libya, the desert continued to claim its victims. Somewhere in the Sahara, Miriam was driving through the night, searching for another mother, another prayer. And in a small apartment in Germany, a family slept together for the first time in more than a year, dreaming of nothing at all. Because, for one night at least, the future was not something to fear. It was simply something to live.